Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel BethChatsBooks. Now today's video is going to finally be my Goodreads Summer Readathon wrap up part 2. So before I begin, apologies for the thumbnail. These were some heavy books. I'm ridiculously bad at getting them straight in line, and also sometimes when I film in my bedroom the camera kind of makes it look a bit wonky, but I can't manage to get it straight because I kind of actually film on my bed, so I stack books as kind of to get it the right head angle, but it ultimately means it always looks a bit skewed because I'm kind of not directly in line in my bedroom, because if I go more this way I've got clutter over on this way, if I go more that way it's right next to the window and kind of affects things, so I'm always a little bit off kilter, so the thumbnail is a bit terrible. But if you guys watch this channel, it's kind of ad-libbed at the best of times with things like thumbnails. I'm not the most techie human, so I'm sure you'll forgive me for that. And I'm wearing my pyjamas, which, yes, I can tell now in this angle look incredibly creased. They are freshly washed, but they are not freshly ironed because I don't iron my pyjamas. I don't know whether some people are now going to comment down below and say that's just weird, but I don't. So they're a little bit creased, but yeah, so it's 9 o'clock here in the evening, so I'm in my pyjamas, obviously. So ramble over, I'm just going to talk about these books because there are quite a few, so I'm just going to go through them in pile order, so this isn't necessarily the order that I read them in. But the first one is Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. This follows the March sisters, Meg, Jo, Amy and Beth, on their adventures into kind of adulthood. So they're kind of in teenagehood at this age. So Meg's the eldest, then it goes Jo, Beth and Amy, and I think there's kind of a year in between them. So I think Meg is approaching her 16th birthday at the beginning of this book, and I think Amy's 12 maybe. And it follows their life in America, kind of growing up and becoming little women, as the book title suggests. So this is a children's classic. I read this as a child, probably 12, 13, and I've revisited it once before now, and so this is kind of a second reread, but I really enjoyed it. It's very light and kind of fluffy, and it discusses some kind of moral issues. So Jo is a bit of the tomboy of the four girls, and she kind of needs smoothing out to become a woman, and so she kind of needs to be more ladylike. So we go through her trials and tribulations, and then Beth kind of suffers from an illness in the book. I kind of won't spoil it, but they all have very different characters and they get up to loads of different little adventures and things, and it's just a sweet little story which I really enjoyed as a child. Obviously you can tell it has been read more than once, it's a bit dog-eared. But I then carried on after I read some of these books with Good Wives, which is the second book, and I'm currently reading Little Men, which is the third one. So there's 4 books in this collection. And I just decided, I think the first time I ever read Little Women, I got up to Good Wives and then I didn't continue, so I thought I just want to finish it since I have all of them. And they're just delightful. They have some kind of tales and morals to them. Overall, just very sweet and very easy to get through. They're only, I think, around 300 pages. So yeah, I think I gave this 3 out of 5 stars, which is the standard that I gave it last time, 3 or 4. Upon rereading it as an adult, I have less patience with it because it is written for children, and it kind of is the same concept of the structure of the chapters repeated again and again, just with a different story, so it does get a little bit repetitive, but it has a special place in my heart, and it always will do, this series, so there's that one. And then the next book is The English Patient by Michael Ondaatje, which I think I gave 4 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed this book. This book, like I mentioned in a previous video, requires you to be an active reader. So this follows Hannah, who is in an Italian villa at the beginning of this novel, and she's looking after the English patient. So we don't know who he is, he doesn't know who he is, he has memory loss and he's severely burnt. They found him in the desert, really badly burnt, and he ended up going to the hospital in Italy where she was working, and then they all got moved out to this villa, which is kind of, it was an old monastery, I believe, and they've kind of been using it as a war hospital. Then the war ended and they were allowed to evacuate. But the English patient was in no position to evacuate, so Hannah stayed with him. And then we meet Caravaggio, which I hope I'm saying right, who was Hannah's dad's best friend. He ends up coming to the villa to see her, and we kind of get the gist in the story that he always had a bit of a soft spot for her, and take that as you will. And then eventually we meet Kip, who is a Indian who came to help in the war effort, and he learnt how to deconstruct bombs in the British countryside, and his job has been to go around different places trying to kind of stop bombs going off, bomb disposal. I don't know how you would describe that. And so this book kind of, structurally, it's very interesting because the paragraphs aren't really broken up into separate people. Things where people are having conversations aren't always well dialogued. It cuts across into different time zones, so it will come back to the villa, but then it might go into Hannah's past when she worked as a nurse during the war. Then it might go back to when Kip was learning how to be trained for his job at bomb disposal. Then it goes back into the desert and kind of a love affair that went on between the English patient and a woman. So it's very rich and there's a lot that goes on here. It is quite a short book, and the structure does mean that you have to be an active reader because 3 different people's points of view will be in one big paragraph, and it won't be broken up, and it won't kind of be signposted to you. So you kind of have to work with it, but it is a book that is highly rewarding when you get to the end of it. And I really, really enjoyed it, and I think I will get so much more out of it upon a reread. And I also have never watched the film with Ralph Fiennes in, which everybody says is fantastic. People of all ages have loved it. So I really think I might watch it and see if that helps kind of make it a more well-rounded read for myself. But yeah, I really enjoyed that. And then the next book is Virginia Woolf's Mrs. Dalloway. Now, I believe I gave this 4 stars. If you don't trust or believe my star rating, because they all sound a bit samey, which, you know, I can understand, then just go to my Goodreads, because I obviously gave it its rating there. But I believe this was 4 stars. Now, this is under 200 pages. But again, this book requires you to be an active reader. It was not a book that you can just whistle through, as some people say, because it's packed with a lot. And this has the stream of consciousness style, which Virginia Woolf is infamous for, or famous for, in which, if you can see, if I can try and show you, there's no chapters, so it's all kind of lot of text, not broken up very well. And this follows Mrs. Dalloway in one day. She's hosting a party, and a guy who she kind of had a bit of a romantic spark with many moons ago, kind of in her youth, has returned, and so we kind of meet him. And then this kind of story threads in and out, and we also meet a man who has kind of post-war trauma, and his wife, and we kind of zoom in and out of their life. So the way this is structured is really interesting because you almost feel like you're a fly on the wall, so you're flying from different things. So there's a sequence near the beginning when she's kind of doing shopping in preparation for the party, and she is around and about in London, and we kind of zoom into her in a shop, and then the way that the kind of perspective goes, we zoom out and we meet this new character, which is the guy that has the PTSD symptoms, and he's on a bench in London, and then we go past another person for a brief period of time, and then we go back to Mrs. Dalloway somewhere else in London, or back at the house. So it does almost feel like you are a fly flitting from different things, and it is very rich in imagery, both of London and kind of the house, and it's also very descriptive about reminiscent memories. So Mrs. Dalloway and also a lot of the other characters reminisce on past memories. It's very reflective. It's really, really interesting. And considering I've always wanted to love Virginia Woolf because I've heard so many amazing things, and I find her a very interesting person in her own right, the fact that I've enjoyed one of her most famous works sounds very promising to me, and it has encouraged me to pick up her other famous works when I get a chance, because this was really, really interesting to me. And then the next one is Jack Kerouac's On the Road. Now, I did not get on with this book. Sorry, I'm just going to move this because my back is starting to ache, so I'm just going to put a pillow there as a bit of relief. So, Jack Kerouac's On the Road, yes. So this follows our protagonist. I've literally just spent 5 minutes trying to leaf through the book to try and figure out his name. It's not on the blurb, and it's not in any of the Goodreads reviews that I have just tried to scroll through. So, I'm presuming he's named. I can't even remember now, but I think he is named. But basically, the book doesn't really revolve around him. He's kind of... It does and it doesn't, in the sense that he's a vessel through which we meet the infamous Dean Moriarty, who is the soul and the light and the purpose of this novel, and everybody loves him. And so this protagonist just ends up going all over America, following him, trying to find him. They take drugs, him and Dean and all their group of friends. They aspire to be writers. They drink a lot. They have a lot of kind of sexual relations with loads of different women. They are going out with some women, engaged to some women. They swap women between each other. Everything's kind of up for grabs. And I did mention in my actual book review of this, which you can go and check if you want, I kind of did a bit of a rant about this one. It was just a bit deplorable and I couldn't really connect with the characters. I feel less impassioned now when I look back, but I didn't really kind of get the point with this one. I felt it was a little bit lost in translation for me. I didn't find this particularly interesting to me. A lot of books that are excessive drugs and drink and like cool boy-esque don't really resonate with me, because I don't care either way. My characters don't have to be, like I've said many times before, they don't have to be perfect and without flaws, but this book has no purpose. They just drift around America, satisfying any salient need and anything they desire. They want instant gratification for it, and they find it, and there's really no inner plot, and there's nothing particularly deep about it. So I think I gave this 2 out of 5 stars. I think that's what I gave it, because it's not really that great. Didn't really like it. And then the next one I read was And the Mountains Echoed by Kayla Torsini. So this is set in Afghanistan, and this follows a family. And let me find out their names. So it was Abdullah and Parry. So at the beginning of this novel, they're inseparable. Parry loves her brother, and then circumstances happen and they get separated. And then we go through Parry's new life, and then we kind of gently touch on a character every time, and then we move to their point of view. So Parry touches another kind of character, interacts with another character. Not literally touches, because that sounds creepy, but I mean, we touch upon a new character within her story that then becomes the focus of the next story chapter, and we move through time, and we kind of end up going back to the cyclical start, but in an unexpected way is the best way to describe that. So Kayla Torsini is a fantastic writer. This is the first work that I fully finished. I did start The Kite Runner many moons ago, but I have 1,000 Splendid Suns and The Kite Runner on my bookshelf, and this has really encouraged me to get to them faster. He's a beautiful storyteller. He has a perfect example in this book and in the other books, if I am thinking correctly, of multiple different points of view. So if anybody wants to know how to do it perfectly, read this book, because I've read a few different stories, like Homegoing by Ya Nassi, and a few others that have multiple points of view that I've enjoyed, but I got a little bit bored of. Especially Barkskins is a really good example by Anna Prue that I just didn't get on with. It just got too boring. These characters, every single one, I was fully invested in their story. And one thing that I want to highlight as well, something that I really love about Kayla Torsini, is he manages to depict relationships, for example, not romantic, but familial relationships, friendships, and he depicts them in a heartbreaking way that has that same soul-destroying kind of impassioned feeling you have when you read a good romance. For me, that is a breathtaking talent. So I devoured this book. I don't remember how many pages it was. It was just about 400, so it was a bit longer than kind of my average read. But I actually got through it at an alarming speed. It was one of the most beautiful stories I've read this year. I was blown away by how beautifully it's written. I obviously gave this 5 out of 5 stars. It was fantastic, and I gave it to my mum because I was so impassioned about it. She read it really quickly. She also told me that she's so thankful I've introduced her to a new author that she loves, and she's currently ordered all of his books and is in the process of reading them. So we've kind of fallen in love with Khaled, and I know that he has got a new book coming out, or has just come out, a very more recent one than this one, which I'll definitely be getting to soon. So I was thoroughly impressed with that. And then the last book, which I probably will not hold up for the duration of this conversation because of its sheer length and size, and that is The Goldfinch by Donna Tartt. So this is 771 pages, and I managed to read it within a week, which I was quite impressed with because it's chunky. So I'm going to slowly put this down. So this story follows Theodore Decker, our protagonist, who's about 12 or 13 at the time. And it starts with he has a day off with his mum because he's kind of being expelled from school, and he lives in New York with his mum, by the way. And they have to go to this meeting, so he's kind of off school and she's off work, and they go to see this famous painting, which is the Goldfinch, which there's a little scrap of here, but one thing that I was really impressed with when I started to read the book is how beautiful it is that they've kind of inserted that picture here so that you kind of had a visual to go back to. So it's called The Goldfinch, and it's having a big exhibition in New York in one of the museums, so she decides to take him. Things ensue, and he becomes motherless. He loses his mother. So his father kind of left them. He's a drunk, he's not reliable, and they never heard from him again. One day he just left, hasn't paid child support, and he's now lost his mother. So Theodore kind of becomes an orphan overnight, and he has to live with some people. I'm just going to make that ambiguous in case you want to actually read the book. And so he kind of dots around a few different places and locations, including Las Vegas. He makes an unlikely friendship while he's over in Las Vegas that has kind of some bad consequences for the future of the book, which I won't go into spoilers. And I kind of round it off there because that's kind of as much as you need to know before you go into it. So it was a really interesting reading experience. I think I gave this, upon reflection, I'm going to give it a 4.5. It wasn't a full 5 because with me, like I've said many times before, a 5-star for me is a gut reaction. I'm probably within less than 200 pages. If it was a 5-star, I would have known. But it was a bit more complicated. There were some bits I had issue with, and then some that I didn't. So Theodore is not a great person. He is a bit messed up and he makes some bad mistakes. However, there are so many redeemable and interesting qualities about him that although this book kind of at some points revels in the badness, and there is a patch in Las Vegas where there's a lot of excessive drink and drug abuse, which kind of gave me horrible flashbacks to On the Road, which I wasn't really feeling. He's not deplorable in the same way. He is confused, he is grieving, and he is complicated, and I loved that the book allowed you to have those multi-layers. So the book actually doesn't have much of a plot in that sense. We spend a lot of time with Theodore. It's kind of a Bildungsroman. We go from Theodore being about 13 to his mid to late 20s. We kind of, as readers, we are Team Theo by the end, and it's really interesting because a lot of the things that he does shouldn't warrant that reaction, but she's written a character that you really invest in. You see the multi-layers and the complexity to the decisions that he makes. While they aren't necessarily good decisions, we can understand why he's done them, and it really adds a kind of nuanced look into a character, and the development is fantastic. So when I first finished it, I was a bit like, because I'd read so much. For example, the Las Vegas bit is a lot of just drug abuse, just a lot of drug abuse, and then there are some bits in the plot where his friend kind of paints him in quite a bad light, and then he goes through a bad time, and those bits were slightly what I would call stagnant of the story, but overall the story was really good. I think in some weird ways you kind of had to keep them in the book, otherwise it might have lost its overall representation. So yeah, I think upon reflection, I think I gave it 4 out of 5 stars on my Goodreads, but I would give it 4.5 because the Goldfinch and the Mountains Echoed were the strongest out of the batch that I read. Saying that, kind of Mrs. Dalloway and The English Patient were in a second category, so I would kind of class them definitely as strong 4s. Goldfinch a little bit more, and then And the Mountains Echoed the peak. So they were all the books that I read for the second half of my Goodreads summer readathon. So I'm really happy because all the ones that were in the TBR I managed to read. And I was quite lucky because there wasn't actually a time scale to finish it. So I think it's by the end of August that it finishes. So I've managed to do it. I did it a bit topsy-turvy, but go me. So I'm really quite happy with that. I'm going to do some recent favourites videos coming up soon. And I'm hoping, I've been loving watching the Reading Rush vlogs recently. They were amazing and I'm kind of gutted I didn't participate, but I've got an essay that I need to do by next week, so I'm going to just focus on doing that and doing some reading. And it's kind of encouraged me to get more involved in doing videos, so yes, I'm going to hope to do a recent reads, and I want to do the RuPaul book tag because I love RuPaul, obsessed, but I'll tell you more about that when I do the actual book tag. I'll just go into a rant then. So yeah, I'm sorry that this is a little bit waffly, the video. It's just my brain function capacity past 8 o'clock is not great, but I really had a craving to just film this and it's out the way and I kind of feel less guilty and I can just focus on my essay and reading. I know that I've checked in with you. So thank you everybody so much for watching, and I'll be back very soon with a brand new video. Bye now.